Simon & Schuster Audio presents Star Trek: Vulcans Forge by Josepha Sherman and Susan Schwartz. Read by Leonard Nimoy.
Intrepid 2, Space, year 2296. The science vessel Intrepid 2 moved silently through space. Spock, once science officer on a very different vessel, now captain of this new ship, sat as still as a Vulcan statue in the command chair, well aware of every passing moment. Now, it was the exact instant when he was scheduled to go off watch. One must be precise with a new crew at the beginning of a mission if they were to settle into the right routine, particularly a crew made up both of veterans from the Enterprise and total newcomers. Spock got to his feet. "You have the bridge, Mr. Duchamp." "I relieve you, sir." Duchamp, like all the crew members who had never served with Spock, was rigidly formal in performing his duties. Spock suspected that this stiff-necked, wary behavior had something to do with those tales no one quite believed about the Vulcans, that their complete self-control meant they had no emotions. As for the veterans, it had been just over one Earth Standard year since the loss of Captain Kirk, and while a Vulcan might be able to portion away grief, a year was hardly sufficient time for humans to adapt. An urgent message waited in his quarters. Spock called up a visual. A bearded face with wry, dark eyes appeared, and Spock felt the smallest thrill of recognition. He remembered this face, beardless and far younger. Yes, David Rabin. Now it would seem Captain David Rabin. "Spock, it's your old desert pal assigned to planetary duty on Obsidian. What am I doing here? Making the desert bloom, my pointy-eared friend. Or at least trying." The smile faded from his face as Rabin described the situation. "Obsidian is a desert world that lies perilously close to the Romulan Empire. Worse, it has a very active sun, Loki, that's producing ever more frequent solar flares. The folks here are sharp-featured humanoids with lean, angular bodies, what you can see of them under their flowing robes. But veils and hooded robes just aren't enough protection. Spock, the cancer mortality rates are terrifying, and the poor kids, well, that's why they've asked for Federation aid." Rabin paused, clearly fighting emotion. "And how has the Federation helped? The crop failure could have been due to faulty genetic coding. The failed hydroponics facility, well, I suppose that the sand fouling the machinery could have filtered in past the controls. The supply dump attacked by beetles. Damn it, a small outpost just doesn't get the personnel to 1, watch for Romulans, 2, guard the outpost, 3, watch every supply dump plus the fields and hydroponics facility, and 4, scan everyone who goes in and out of the city." Shouts rang out in the background. Rabin tensed, then groaned. Another supply dump's just been sabotaged. Spock, these people deserve better, especially the kids. We really need your help, my friend, as quickly as possible. Shalom, and Rabin out." The screen went dark, and Spock swiftly brought up data on Obsidian. He raised an eyebrow at the political and ecological complications, then stabbed the control button. "Lieutenant Duchamp, divert course to Obsidian with all deliberate speed. I should suggest maximum scan and yellow alert as we near the neutral zone." "Aye, aye, sir." One did not need to be a Vulcan to know that diverting course was likely to bring questions, if not outright debate. Spock took down his litherette. He hadn't even begun to tune it when the first interruption occurred. "Yes, Mr. Atherton." "Captain, I've just calibrated my engines and was counting on testing them at lower speed when your order came. I would hate to put undue pressure on the dilithium crystal mounts because the commander of a minor outpost has overreacted. The accent was different, but in Atherton's protective outrage, Spock heard an echo of Scotty's frequent wails about his dilithium crystals. "Me barons, me pure wee barons." It was only this memory that kept Spock from giving the human a precise, perfectly logical dressing down. "The rest of the ship is in such exemplary order, Mr. Atherton, that I think you might countenance the speed. I knew Captain Rabin when we were boys. I've traveled with him. He would not send out a distress call without great need." The view screen showed how thoroughly Atherton's pale face had reddened. "Aye, aye, sir." And Spock's screen went blank. There were no further messages of import, and Spock began to tune the litherette. He glanced at the chronometer and made a private estimate. Quite within the time frame Spock had projected, the doors to his quarters parted. Privacy coding overridden as only a privileged character might do. "Dr. McCoy." "Spock, you never told me you had a human buddy when you were a kid. Since you have already intruded, Doctor, please sit down." From his pocket, McCoy produced a bottle filled with a cobalt blue liquid. "If you were a drinking man, Spock, I'd say you could use a drink. Where do you keep your glasses?" "I see no logic to the ingestion of ethanol, especially not before what might be a ship's action." McCoy ignored him. A quick foray produced a pair of translucent stone goblets into which the doctor poured the frothing ale. "If this was Sarian brandy or Tennessee bourbon, I wouldn't waste it on you. But Romulan ale? If your Romulan cousins can drink it, you certainly can. Romulans do many things no sane Vulcan would do." "Sane Vulcan? Isn't that somewhat redundant?" Spock remembered that McCoy had often harassed Jim Kirk with such well-meaning visits. Quoting Kirk, Spock said, "You're a bartender, not a doctor." McCoy almost choked, then raised his glass in appreciation. "Absent friends." Indeed, absent friends. There was a pause before McCoy spoke. "I miss him too, Spock." A flash of memory, the sharp stab of grief, the memorial ceremony, with humans allowed to show that grief, while he must keep his face forever properly impassive. "What would you have me say, Doctor? One cannot change the past." If a diatribe about Spock's coldness brought the doctor any ease of heart, he was welcome to it. But there was a suspicious warmth in McCoy's eyes. "You're worried about this childhood friend. David Rabin is a distinguished officer, a capable individual even before he entered Starfleet. In fact, he is one of the reasons I entered Starfleet. Nevertheless, you're worried. Why, Spock?" "Because Captain Rabin is worried, and I trust him. Obsidian is of strategic importance because of its location near the neutral zone." Spock handed a data pad to McCoy, who scanned it, then glanced up, eyes compassionate. "It's not the Romulans, it's the waste that's scaring a friend, isn't it? The loss of life. The children who'll never have a chance at life. The people who'll never be without misery. And don't tell me your heart doesn't bleed for them, too. If you seek to elicit a reaction from me for which I am not equipped, you are in error." "It's okay, Spock. I won't tell anyone that your heart's in the right place for a Vulcan. Get some rest, Captain. We've got a lot of work facing us on Obsidian." Someone, I forget who, once said the desert is a forge on which to try the... Hell, I forget. Soul, probably. A forge, Spock mused. Long ago, he and Rabin had been hammered out on another such forge. Vulcan, Sarek's estate, year 2247. The view from Sarek's estate was tranquil in Vulcan's early morning, the air still cool, the vast red sweep of desert and mountains blue with shadow. Young Spock, already nearly his father's height at almost 17, though not yet grown out of a boy's gangliness, stood, trying to empty his mind of all but the tranquility before him, and failing. Surely it was not illogical to wonder about himself. Spock was quite well aware of his own hybrid complexity. But a reasoning being was more than a mere assemblage of genes. What then am I? And what am I to be? To be an ambassador? That was his father's path, not his. A fact Sarek could not or would not see. Sarek, impressive in somber red, approached Spock and signaled. "Come, my son. Our guest has arrived." Sared had once been Sarek's classmate at the Vulcan Science Institute. Now he was Sarek's political antagonist, advocating Vulcan's withdrawal from the Federation. As they re-entered the home, Sarek warned Spock. "Sared always was brilliant and deliberately charming. Do not let him charm you." The two political rivals greeted each other with just the proper amount of civility. Sared was tall and lean, with the clean, sharp features of a noble from Vulcan's distant past. He was dressed almost too austerely in a simple brown robe. "Colleague Sared, this is my son, Spock. Spock, this is the scholar, Sared." Spock was caught by Sared's intense stare, a stare that seemed to sum up all that Spock was and would ever be, and found him lacking. Sared said, "He does look truly of our people. I see nothing of humanity in his appearance." Sarek never stirred. "There is no shame in my son's parentage, nor is there shame in that of my lady wife." The faintest hint of a smile touched Sared's eyes. "A fine and sadly rare thing to see so strong a bond. Even if it is, this is not meant as insult, Sarek, but as simple fact, even if it is misplaced. Ours is a long and proud heritage worthy of protection, yet some of that heritage has already been lost because of our alliance with the other Federation worlds. But we have debated this before, Sarek, and I will not waste our time in going over old ground. More important for our people is that we not forget Surak's teachings. Too much has already been lost through misinterpretation, false doctrine, and the sundering of our kind. Our ways have become stale, rigid, far from the healthy whole proposed by Surak. While who can say what our sundered cousins have become? Do you not wish to know?" "Of course, but not if it involves surrendering all that we are and may become." Sared stepped back from the confrontation to study an elegant tan and brown wall hanging. "Tirezic's work, is it not? See how this twist of fiber leads the eye to follow till it joins this thread and becomes one with it? Stronger than before. That, Sarek, is exactly my point. There must be a merging of the sundered cultures, the halves made whole. We must use the fierce, healthy, yes, the emotional strain to rejuvenate Vulcan's tired bloodlines." Sared's glance flicked to Spock, flicked away. "In a new joining, a better order, those of lesser blood might be deemed less worthy." "Blood is a substance neither superior nor inferior. Odd that it should be used as an excuse for bias, even in enlightened times. But of course, Sared, you would never stoop to illogic. The fault must be mine for misunderstanding. If you wish to leave after such a lack of communication, there is no loss of dignity." Sared, his face a stony mask, dipped his head almost curtly to Sarek, ignored Spock completely, and left. Sarek gazed after his colleague. "That is, alas, a sadly warped and dangerous being." "But he does make some interesting points, Father. Since emotion and mystery are a part of the Vulcan soul, is it not illogical not to study such issues?" "Spock, I did warn you. Sared can be totally charming to even one fully grown, and you are still far from that. Surely even a child may see the value of..." His father cut him off. There can be no value in a return to violence. I do not mean to belittle your thinking, but you must admit that I have had many more years of study and of life's experiences. Yes, of course, but your control slips, Spock. Those ancient days must sound fascinating to one as young as yourself, but there is nothing fascinating about war or mindless bloodshed. This lecture was becoming too much for a young Vulcan's self-control. Spock dipped his head. You have given me much to ponder, Father. If I may. At Sarek's slight nod, Spock fled to the sanctuary of his mother's wet planet conservatory. There he stood amid unfamiliarly damp air and strange, lush-leaved plants, willing himself back to proper reserve. A footstep made him turn. Mother? Lady Amanda looked every bit a true Vulcan lady in her simple, elegant gray robes. She said, I thought you were with your father. I was. There was a heartbeat's pause before his mother replied. I see. He doesn't mean to lecture you, Spock, truly. We are concerned about you. I'll even use an emotional term if you'll excuse the lapse of good taste. We're worried about you. Why? Because I am not truly Vulcan? Lady Amanda countered. Because you haven't yet puzzled out who and what you are. Spock, everyone goes through the who am I stage. It's part of growing up. And you aren't hearing a word of this, are you? Mother, forgive me. I've heard too many lectures this day. Lady Amanda clearly was exasperated. Teenagers, they're all the same. Everyone's the same. Oh, I don't mean in surface things like appearance, but you know that I've been studying the Federation races, and the more I study, the more I find constants. Spock, have you heard that ancient children's tale of the hero transformed into a hideous beast, a guise from which he's rescued by the heroine? Spock frowned. Yes, of course. That is Sikan and Trissa. Surely you do not claim to find truth in such a foolish story. Amanda paused to delicately pinch off a wilted leaf. Oh, I do. To you, that tale is Sikan and Trissa. But to me, that's Beauty and the Beast. And to Andorians, it becomes the prince in monster form. Spock. Archetypes. Certain set figures and concepts are in all of us. Even Vulcans, with all their self-control, have them, such as the Eater of Souls. She laughed when Spock could not quite suppress a tiny flinch. You see, the Eater of Souls was a demon that had once been said to manifest itself during the summer solstice, a being that devoured Vulcan essences down to the Katra. Spock said, the Eater of Souls is a foolish relic far removed from science. Lady Amanda nodded. And yet, like it or not, you reacted. Vulcans can't and shouldn't deny their basic mythic roots. Those are a part of every sentient being. And I know that Vulcans don't want to throw away their honored heritage. The day had begun with confusion, and his father and mother were only adding to that. Rather than breach good manners with emotion, Spock bowed and left to be alone with his thoughts. Obsidian, Deep Desert, year 2296. The Master spurned even the faintest shadow of the sheltering rock cliff and strode out into the deep desert, his arms outstretched, as if to welcome the light of a star that both gave life and took it agonizingly away. The world's sun flashed into his eyes, and the veil, in instinctive reflex, descended over his eyes, and he permitted it to remain for that instant. He lifted his hand further, bearing his head to the light. The star was at zenith. It was too bright a gold and more poisonous than the star under which he had been born, and that he would never see again, unless the faithful and his sundered brothers helped him wrest its control from weaklings and traitors. He was too old for the blood fever. Still his blood was fire. His eyes were fire. He stripped the veils from them and gazed directly into the sunlight. The faithful who had followed him from their rock fastnesses now assembled behind him. He heard the whisper of worn cloth and knew that one or two, perhaps more, had followed his example and dared uncover there in the pitiless light. Would you skulk your puny lives away underneath a rock because you fear your star and its gifts of life and death? He had demanded only the night before. Pale you are, and call it safety, as a Terran maggot was safe, whether it crawled or walked abroad on two legs and made futile attempts to make the desert bloom. Deserts were not supposed to bloom. They were a forge on which the strong must be tested if the race were to thrive and conquer. The faithful whispered briefly among themselves, saving their strength for endurance and to contemplate the garden that he had promised to set in the middle of the deepest waste, filled with sweet water, abundant food, and strong children. In that paradise, no one's skin fissured or blossomed with evil, deadly colors. No one collapsed and died. But there was a world to win before paradise could be regained. His eyes were fire. His blood was fire. And his brothers were calling. To meet him here at the appointed place, far away from the concealment of rock or the reassurance of shielded equipment, when solar flares were imminent, was a risk worthy of his warrior forebears. Energy pooled, static, crackling as a sudden turbulent shimmering erupted on the desert plain. For an instant, the brothers who were more outsiders than true kindred seemed to float above the sand and gravel, sheathed in light, crowned with fierce colors. They flickered out, then returned, stronger than before. The faithful whispered,
They come. Without a ship, they come.
Crowned in glory, they walk, so tall and so unscarred.
To these primitives he thought with sharp contempt. The Romulans, with their lean height, their arrogant bearing, ready for thought or warfare combined, would look like messengers from that paradise he had prophesied for them. Now their dreams must come true, and his along with them. It was not illogical to dream. It was merely illogical to pour one's blood out upon the sand. Far better that it be Federation blood. The Romulans, even here he would not willingly speak the name they had for themselves or call them brothers before lesser creatures, saluted him, to which he replied with a stately inclination of his head. The faithful whispered,
Even these messengers from the heavens honor him, our prophet, ours.
It was more to the point, he thought, as the Romulans, heavily armed, clasped his arm in the warrior's greeting, to say not that he was their prophet, but that they were his sacrifices, or anything else he needed. The young centurion had once heard a senator say, If you can bear to hear an insult, and not blindly kill to avenge the slight, you can bear to salute a traitor. And it was not, after all, as if the tall figure casting a long shadow over the sand were a traitor to the senator his own commander served, much less to the praetor himself. He was simply a traitor to his own race. The young centurion thought that he could very well endure another world's treachery, especially if the traitor declared himself open to alliance against the Federation. They would use him, and when they had won, they would turn and conquer the traitor's world as well, giving him his dream of a reunited breed, only not in the way he had hoped. The centurion moved toward the nearest escarpment, protected by the striated rock. Momentarily somewhat cooler, he snapped open his communicator. He whispered words implanted by drug therapy that he had not even known he had learned, and that he would later forget. There was a pause. during which the young Romulan listened to the electrons dance between here and the warbird he wished to his ancestors he had never left. Then... Well? Only that one word. Avrak, sister's son to Senator Pardick, rarely spoke more than needful. It was far safer that way. The senator stood in place of a father to Avrak, who was in turn the Centurion's own patron. Sir, he could be as sparing of speech as Avrak. How is our traitor? This malfunctioning star hasn't cooked his brains, not quite yet, even if he does think he's in charge. Excellent. Keep it that way. The communicator went dead. Had that been a chuckle he'd heard? Despite the heat of the deep desert and the restraint bred into him, the Romulan shuddered. Spock, McCoy, and the other members of the away team materialized in the dazzling light and heat of Obsidian. The veils instantly slid down over Spock's eyes, then up again as his desert-born vision adapted, while the humans hastily adjusted their sun visors. He glanced about at this new world, flat, gravelly surface that stretched to a horizon of jagged volcanic peaks. A hot wind teased grit and sand into miniature spirals, and the sun glinted off the black volcanic glass. The Federation detail greeted them. At its head, a sturdy, familiar figure, David Rabin, clad in standard Federation hot-weather gear, save for his decidedly non-standard headgear of loose, flowing material. Spock approved. Sensible to adapt an effective local solution to the problem of sunstroke. McCoy raised an eyebrow. Rabin of Arabia. Spock let that pass. Captain Rabin, grinning widely, raised his hand in the Vulcan greeting. Live long and prosper. There could be no possible response but one. Shalom. The party boarded an old Federation ground transport, and soon they were approaching Kalara. Spock observed that it looked very much the standard desert city. Mud brick really was the most practical organic building material, and thick walls and high windows provided efficient passive air cooling. He noticed the vast network of irrigation canals and wells. Clearly, these people were doing a clever job of exploiting their meager resources, or would be if it were not for that treacherous sun. They left the vehicles and entered the Federation outpost, jumping from timelessness to gleaming modernity. Spock paused at the shock of what to him was a wall of unwelcome coolness. The humans all breathed sighs of relief. McCoy put down his shoulder pack with a grunt. Hot as Vulcan out there. Rabin grimaced. If you think this is bad, wait till summer. I think you all know the situation here. Spock frowned slightly and said, taken as a whole, the incidents can logically only add up to deliberate sabotage. Yet the Obsidians seem to be a people with a low level of technology. Rabin nodded. That's right. And before you ask, there's absolutely no trace of Romulan involvement. Then we need to ask, who of this world has sufficient organization and initiative? Rabin shrugged. Who indeed? We've got a good many local dissidents. We both know how many nonconformists the desert can breed. But none of the local agitators could ever band together long enough to mount a definite threat. They hate each other more than they hate us. And much as I'd love to up and search all that vastness outside, Spock finished his thought, it would mean leaving the outpost unguarded. What of a planetary scan from the Intrepid 2? At Rabin's thankful nod, Spock moved to the banks of equipment measuring ionization levels. The fluctuating levels pose difficulties to an accurate scan. Still, we will attempt one. Uhura frowned slightly at Captain Spock's terse message. I would appreciate the crew performing a planetary scan for intelligent life. Science Officer Richards will want to coordinate with medical for the requisite parameters and brainwave complexities. Spock out. Spock would hardly have said anything melodramatic like, I can say nothing further for reasons of security, but that curtness meant reasons of security, all right. Her thoughts were interrupted by the voice of Ensign Chang. Commander? Ensign Chang? I just spotted the weirdest blip on the screen. It emerged from the neutral zone, just for a second, and then it vanished. I recorded it, though. Wait, there. Did you see it? I did indeed. Open a hailing frequency, narrow beam, Captain Spock only, and scramble it. Spock answered the hail, and Uhura leaned over the control panel. Captain Spock, urgent. We've just uncovered signs of a Romulan warbird. It's cloaked. But they lowered that cloaking for a few moments, and that suggests to me that someone just beamed down to Obsidian. Excellent logic, Commander. Uhura stiffened in a moment's pleased surprise. That was high praise from a Vulcan. Thank you, Spock. I needed that. Spock and Rabin were seated in Rabin's small, secure office in the Federation outpost. The space was barely more than a closet, but the blank walls and smooth, unornamented furnishings left no places for spy devices. Spock nevertheless ran a quick check. Yes, secure, which brought him to the point. Security on Obsidian has almost certainly been breached. There are too many examples of a supposedly low-tech people knowing too much about activities here, and we cannot rely on information from the Intrepid alone. Rabin looked at his old friend, the two of them in perfect understanding. So we agree. Someone has to actually get out in the desert and search. Logically, it must be Federation personnel alone who investigate. We cannot risk a spy. And equally logically, it's going to have to be those with the most desert experience. Guess what, Spock? There is no guess to this. You and I are the most logical choices. Rabin grinned. Again. Vulcan, Mount Solea, year 2247. Dawn hovered over Mount Solea. The stairs that swept upward to the narrow bridge still lay in shadow. Faint mist rose about the mountain, perhaps from the snow that capped it alone of Vulcan's peaks, or perhaps from the lava bubbling sullenly 1,000 meters below. At sunrise, the ritual honoring young Spock and his age-mates would begin. Spock resolutely concentrated only on following his parents, though he could hear the other boys discussing the Federation guests up ahead.
I've heard these humans take drugs to help them breathe. They look sickly.
That was Stahn's voice. It was not logical for Stahn to resent him for being both half-human and eldest among the boys of his year, but it was so. Then Spock heard one of the human females shout, "David, don't lean over like that or you'll give me a heart attack." Spock saw that she wore the uniform of a Starfleet captain, and she was tugging a boy who resembled her back from the edge of the bridge. Allowing for variations in species and body type, the human youth seemed close to his own age. "David, I know you're excited about seeing Vulcan." The boy broke in, hardly able to contain himself. "Aren't you? I mean, look at that desert. It makes Sinai National Preserve look like a sandbox." "Calm down, David. I might be able to arrange a field trip, but not if you create an interplanetary incident by falling off the mountain." Not 50 meters away stood Serid, his austere robe ornamented only by the symbol denoting head of house. Sarek stopped near the Federation officer and her son. "Ah, Captain Rabin. Do you find your stay on Vulcan instructive?" "Very. My assignment honors me." "You do your service justice, Captain. My wife, may I present Starfleet Captain Nechama Rabin from the planet of your birth. Captain, this is the Lady Amanda, my wife." Amanda courteously lifted her veil and offered, "Shalom, Captain." Captain Rabin smiled. "Live long and prosper, Lady Amanda. May I present my son, David. He enters Starfleet Academy next year." Sarek gave a slight nod. Another generation of service. Highly commendable. Spock's glance happened to fall on Sarad. At this sign that Sarek favored both today's ceremony and the invitation of Federation representatives, Sarad's expression altered in a way that would have been imperceptible to a human, but to a Vulcan was as blatant as a grimace of revulsion. Sarad turned and vanished into the crowd. Captain Rabin asked, "And is this not your son, Ambassador Sarek?" "Indeed." "Spock." Spock bowed in silence. Was Captain Rabin disconcerted by the brusqueness of the introduction? Her face revealed nothing. With a non-committal smile, the captain withdrew, taking David with her. Spock listened to their conversation as they moved away. "Do you think they'd let him meet me? I'd love to meet a Vulcan my age. You know, everyone's talking about Vulcan boys. What about Vulcan girls? They can't be secondary citizens. I mean, T'Pau's important, isn't she? And what about Tilar of Gol?" "We are not going to pry, are we? This is not, incidentally, your mother speaking. This is the captain. Understood, mister?" Surely, Spock thought, there was nothing improper about an inquiring mind. It would be interesting to speak with this Terran, who shared a trait with... But Sarek would probably not allow him to risk exposure to human emotionalism. Spock turned to follow his parents. At the entrance of the amphitheater, 2 masked guards bearing ceremonial lurpa, the only weapons permitted here, saluted Spock for the first time as an adult. For all his attempts at control, he felt a little shiver race through him as he returned the salutes for the first time as an adult. Smiling, Lady Amanda removed her fingers from her husband's hand. "I shall join the other ladies of our house now, my husband. And Spock, I'm very proud of you." Her gaze told him, "As is your father." Spock fell into step with his father. Ahead, on a platform between 2 pillars, stood an altar of dark stone. A dark-robed student of the disciplines of Gol struck an ancient hexagonal gong, the deep sound fading slowly. Everyone in the amphitheater rose as Tilar, adept and first student, walked onto the platform. 2 guards entered with a curtained carrying chair. From it, robed in black and crimson, stepped T'Pau, leaning on an intricately carved stick. She bowed to Tilar, then both women bowed to the youths who stood waiting their presentation. Tilar raised her arms, the white and silver of her sleeves like great wings. "As it was in the beginning, so shall it always be. These sons of our house have shown their worthiness." An angry voice broke in. "I protest!" Astonished murmurs rose through the crowd as Sarad, robe swirling about him, strode to the altar. "I protest the profanation of these rites. I protest the way they have been stripped of their meaning. I protest the way our mysteries are revealed to outsiders." T'Pau spoke. "Has thee finished?" Sarek whirled to face her. "No. Above all, I protest that worthier men, our exiled cousins, go unhonored and unrecognized." T'Pau answered. "Thee speaks of those who exiled themselves. Return lies in their power, not in ours." Sarah turned and addressed the crowd. "So it does. Welcome our lost kindred." He tore off his austere robe, revealing the barbaric garb of a warlord from the ancient days. Sunlight picked out the metal of his harness in violent red and exploded into rainbow fire where it touched the gem-studded grip of the energy weapon Sarad had brought, against all law. A rainbow shimmer of a transporter rose and died, leaving behind 6 tall figures in black and silver. They raised laser rifles and quickly cut down the Lurpa-wielding guards, then turned to the guests. Spock darted forward, not sure what he could do, knowing only it was not logical to wait meekly for death. But he faltered at the sight of Sarad's drawn features, the 2 bright eyes staring at a vision only Sarad saw. Few Vulcans ever went insane, but here was true madness. A Starfleet officer charged Sarad. "Drop that weapon!" Serret laughed. Firing at point-blank range, he shot the man. The human flashed out of existence right in front of Spock, and Serret sneered at Spock's horror. Half-blood, but you will serve. David Rabin crashed into Serret, bringing them both down. The weapon flew from Serret's hand right to Spock. He snatched it up, aiming at Serret. But Serret stared, unafraid. Can you kill a brother Vulcan? Can you? Spock froze. The unfamiliar weight of the weapon in his hand. Could he? Suddenly, what felt like half the mountain fell on him. The fierce dawn went black. Obsidian, Deep Desert, year 2296. The Master stood under the blazing sun, fire to burn away impurities, fire to destroy those who would not yield. Behind him, a handful of his faithful had gathered. You disturb me. Why? Arakan Ikaran, chief of the faithful, stepped forward. The spy has sent a report from the outsider base, the Federation outpost. A small force has set out into the desert, headed by the outsider fool and another, one like you, Master. It took every atom of the Master's will not to start. It could not be part of a Federation trap. They could not know what, who he was. Arakan Ikaran was watching him warily. Master, is this one of your holy kind? The Master stared him down. No. Think, you who call yourselves my faithful. Who would bear my seeming, yet be of the outsiders? The crowd erupted into panicked cries.
The fiery one!
The outsiders have sent the fiery one!
In their primitive belief, the fiery one was the evil force, the foul and all-destroying blaze. The Master sought to re-establish his control. I shall be a clear white flame to protect you, but you must serve me. The crowd replied.
We do.
We always will.
Let us serve.
In time. Now, Arakan Ikaran, tell me what else our spy had to say. With the outsiders rides one they call a chief medical officer. Is this not a shaman? A person of some importance? It is. But the Master was wondering. Chief medical officer from which ship? Is the Federation calling in new vessels? Arakan Ikaran took his hesitation for encouragement. Is this not a useful thing? Would he not make a valuable hostage? The Master nodded. Indeed. He should also make a most valuable lure. The desert robe, Spock reflected, felt comfortably familiar, similar in weight and weave to those from Vulcan. Ahead stood the rest of the party, 6 humans, 4 from the outpost, the 5th and 6th, geologist Lieutenant Diver and Dr. McCoy from the Intrepid. Plus himself, Spock thought, 7. The shuttlecraft would be almost full, but not overburdened. There would be room for a prisoner, should such a need arise. McCoy, medical gear slung over his shoulder, shook his head. I knew we weren't going to wear standard uniforms, but I never expected this. His sweep of a hand took in all the loose, flowing desert gear. Captain Rabin, resplendent in a white desert robe and flowing headscarf that made only the vaguest nods to regulations, shrugged. Maybe it's not Federation textbook, but it's practical. McCoy snorted. I'm a doctor, not Lawrence of Arabia. Rabin gave him an elaborate salaam. The pilot, a handsome olive-skinned young man, said, Most elegantly done, sir. Rabin bowed in the young man's direction. Why, thank you, Ensign Prince. Spock was intrigued. Do you refer to the ancient title? The ensign grinned. Yes, Captain Spock. I am Prince Faisal ibn Saud ibn Turki, and so on, of the ancient Saudi line. I am, by my father's calculation, 79th in line for the throne. Rabin broke in. For the sake of convenience, we refer to him as Ensign Prince. While he's waiting for the crown, he's our shuttlecraft pilot. Spock turned to study the antiquated craft. It seems similar to the Galileo 7 model. That's exactly what it is, modified for the desert. McCoy exploded. Damnation! The Federation never throws anything away, does it? Rabin smiled. Waste not, want not. That's the outpost way. Then he squinted up at the cloudless, blinding sky. Our meteorologists assure us that there are no nearby storms. But unfortunately, Obsidian's weather is too unpredictable for any serious long-range forecasting. On that interesting note, gentlefolk, let's go. The ancient shuttlecraft groaned, shuddered, then lifted slowly off the ground. Lieutenant Diver, who'd been looking intently out the forward window, straightened. Sirs, there are traces of ancient watercourses down there. Probably can't be seen from the ground. Spock found the faint, dark lines to which the lieutenant referred. Continue with your thought, Lieutenant. Whoever's doing the sabotage has to have a safe base of operations, as well as a source of water. I'd guess that there's still water up in those mountains to the northwest, and that if we follow the watercourses, dried up though they are, back along their route, we'll come to it. Rabin nodded. And hopefully the base. Scanners picking up anything, Ensign Kavusi? Burly young Rustam Kavusi glanced at him in frustration. Too much static. Rabin shrugged. So much for high-tech. What do you suggest, Spock? That we follow Lieutenant Diver's advice, and what clues we have from the Intrepid scan, and investigate the mountains. Rabin spoke to the pilot. Ensign Prince, change our course to bearing 49.5. Over the next few hours, the ancient shuttlecraft creaked ever closer to the mountains. Suddenly, Rabin frowned. You're going off course, Ensign Prince. Heading should be 29.6 west, 43.2 north. That's 29.6, Ensign. No disrespect, sir, but I'm trying to stay on course. There's a tricky wind. The shuttlecraft rocked as though a giant hand had slapped it. Rabin barked. Weather reading, Mr. Kavusi. Doesn't look good, sir. Sudden shift of wind. Hot air swirling up off the desert floor, hitting the colder air coming down off those mountains. He didn't have to explain further. A sandstorm was being born. With eerie swiftness, a wall of dirty brown swirled up off the desert floor. Take her up higher, Ensign Prince. Upper stratosphere if you can. Get us out of here. The shuttlecraft lurched, then climbed abruptly, only to be just as abruptly thrust down again, shuddering, engines whining. Ensign Prince spoke. We can't get above the storm. The wind's too fierce. Ensign Kavusi, get us a reading. What's beneath us? Kavusi struggled with the sensors. Can't tell, sir. There's far too much static. Ensign Prince shouted. This old wreck isn't going to hold together much longer. Spock turned to Rabin. When positive data are lacking, extrapolation of the last known facts becomes necessary. In other words, guess. Take her down, Ensign Prince. Engines whining with strain, the shuttlecraft descended through brown and brown, descended. Then, with bone-jarring force, they were down. Captain's log. Stardate 9814.3. Commander Uhura, recording Captain. Intrepid 2. Captain Spock has beamed down to Obsidian's surface along with Chief Medical Officer McCoy and Lieutenant Diver. We are conducting a full planet scan for intelligent life while Captains Spock and Rabin, Lieutenant Diver, and several outpost personnel conduct a local search. I have reported the sighting of a hostile ship, most probably Romulan, to the nearest starbase, but do not expect an answer for several days. I have become concerned about Captain Spock. Meteorology reports a growing storm in precisely the sectors for which his flight plan was filed. Uhura out. Science Officer Richards glanced at her. Commander, that dust storm in planetary sectors 7.34 to 9.68. Sensors are showing turbulence up to about 10 kilometers into the atmosphere. Storm's already built up to what would be Force 1 hurricane strength on Earth. Now it's showing signs of turning into a Coriolis storm, one that gains strength from the planet's rotation. Uhura knew that given the composition of Obsidian's deserts, a storm like that could kill. Richards went on. Captain, I'm reading increased sunspot activity and a buildup of energy that could mean a massive solar eruption. Could happen 6 minutes or 6 hours from now, or 6 weeks. What about radiation levels, mister? Richards shook his head. Not good. Uhura gave her orders. Helm, move us into Obsidian's shadow. I want planetary mass between us and Loki. Suddenly, the view screen filled with static. Richards called to Uhura. Commander, a flare started. Better strap down. When that first shock wave hits... Uhura turned to Duchamp. Status report. Any sign of that warbird? Negative, Commander. Negative. Keep looking, mister. The cloaking device might distort the ion flux just enough so that we can spot it. Keep an eye on any dead space. And she thought, try not to worry. Aboard the crash-landed shuttle, McCoy cleared his throat. Anything broken? Rabin gave a half-smile. Just Ensign Prince's pride, I'd say. The ensign answered, Sir, you know what they say. A good landing is any one you can walk away from. Let's see what we've got left to walk away from. Were you able to see our landing site at all? Got some quick glimpses of mountains, then even the instruments weren't registering much. Spock turned to the geologist. Lieutenant Diver, cartography calls this the Rupathan Range. Not sure about the accuracy, not with that rock composition. Hey! The ship lurched, sliding downwards, stopping with a jolt. Rabin barked out, Ensign Prince, see if you can lift us off, now! The pilot worked furiously. For a few moments there was a whine of overstressed engines, then silence. We're not going anywhere, sir. Wait, I'm getting a visual. Ah, sir, the only thing between us and what looks like a drop of approximately 100 meters is one rock. If it gives way... Spock leaned over Faisal's shoulder to study what he could see of the terrain. What can we expect of this region, Captain Rabin? Are they caves? Yes. Lieutenant Diver, try to locate one with a sonic scan. Meanwhile, let's see if we can reach the base. He tried his communicator, then flipped it shut in frustration. Ah, nothing. Spock thumbed open his own communicator. Nothing here either. I shall assume that the Intrepid has shifted orbit to place the planet between it and Loki. Diver looked up from her console. I'm getting something. A cave. Maybe 50 meters away. The shuttlecraft lurched again. Rabin took command. We've got to get out of here. Ensign Prince? Port's stuck. I can't get it open. Stand aside, Ensign. Spock trained his phaser on the door, burning away the damage with the finesse of a surgeon. He forced the port open just wide enough for his fingertips to fit between the door itself and the shuttle's bulkheads, and pulled. The port began to slide open, painfully slowly. Rabin and Ensign Kabusi joined him. On the count of 3, Spock. 1, 2, 3! The port flew open. Obsidian's winds gusted in their faces, and rock dust swirled into the shuttle's cabin. All right, folks, move! McCoy left with Kabusi's hand at the small of his back, the doctor clutching his medical gear possessively. The rest of the party filed out until only Spock and Rabin remained. Then there was the scream of tortured metal. "The shuttle's falling! Spock! Move!" Spock sprang clear of the shuttle. He twisted in mid-jump, catching Rabin's arm. Rabin jumped. Spock pulled, and they went sprawling on the ground outside. The shuttle tumbled down the mountain and disappeared into the swirling dust. Exhausted, the away party sat huddled in the cave. It had been a grueling climb up the mountain. Captain Rabin slowly straightened. "Come on, folks. Rouse. Roll call." Spock tensed, missing one familiar face. "Where is Dr. McCoy?" Captain Rabin turned to Ensign Cabusi. "Wasn't he with you?" "All the way. I pushed him halfway up the hill. You could hear him complaining over the storm." Spock said, "But did anyone see the doctor actually enter the cave?" "Ensign Diver." "Yes, sir. He was grumbling, something about not having the sense to come in out of the rain. It didn't make too much sense to me, but by then I was too busy scouting out the cave. You don't suppose he went back out there?" "The doctor, while erratic, is not irrational." "But, sir, what if he dropped his medical equipment and went back for it? That would explain that come in out of the rain comment. He really could be wandering about outside." "Lieutenant, if Dr. McCoy were wandering about outside, he would long ago have ceased to wander." Diver was stunned. "You're just going to leave him?" "I will not risk lives in a search until the storm subsides. I suggest, Lieutenant, that you join the others in seeing how this cave can be made habitable." "Aye, aye, sir." Rabin moved to Spock's side. "Well, do you know something the rest of us don't?" McCoy had once borne Spock's Katra. Spock reached for whatever tenuous link might remain. "Dr. McCoy is alive." Rabin raised an eyebrow, clearly wanting more data than he was getting. Then he gave up and turned to the others. "All right, folks. I don't have to tell anyone not to go for a stroll out there, but I don't want anyone to go anywhere alone." Ensign Prince shrugged fatalistically, then stretched out on the rocky floor, head cushioned on an arm. Rabin smiled. "Ensign Prince has the right idea. All of you get some rest. We'll discuss our options later." Cautiously, the crew members found places to sit or lie, making themselves as comfortable as possible. Rabin drew Spock aside. "What do you think, Spock?" "I think that our limited supplies cannot provide sufficient nourishment, water in particular, for all. Logically, those most experienced in desert survival must hunt for aid. The others must remain here to call your base and await pickup. The most experienced of us being you and me. Partners again, huh, Spock?" "Indeed. But first, we must provide a means of communications for those staying." Spock began to deftly dismantle the communicator. "If we combine all the communicators, there should be sufficient power for at least a brief distress call. No, you need not help. You are human and need more rest. Go to sleep, my friend." Mouthing, "Yes, Mother," Rabin went to find himself a space. Spock felt the corner of his mouth crook up ever so slightly. It was illogical, perhaps, but strangely heartening to know that David Rabin was as irrepressible as ever. And McCoy? Survive. Wherever you are, do what you must, but survive. Vulcan, location unknown, year 2247. Young Spock woke in slow, dizzy stages. His head ached, his vision refused to focus, and the world did not seem properly firm. Gradually, he began to remember. The ceremony gone so terribly wrong. Sered, the Starfleet officer, instantly destroyed. And then someone had struck him with sufficient force to stun him. He was in a shuttlecraft. Ahead, Sered sat beside the cousin piloting this craft. Spock glanced warily about. Not only had Sered escaped, he had taken hostages. A whisper made him tense. "Spock, are you all right?" No, don't look at me. They haven't noticed we're awake yet. It's me, David Rabin." He broke off as the shuttlecraft lurched roughly. A glance out a window revealed nothing but a swirling curtain of brown. A sandstorm. Sered was ordering the craft into it. "They will be unable to track us. Their sensors confused by the storm. We shall hide from the fools far beyond the forge. In that wilderness is a region naturally shielded from all detection. The womb of fire. We've gone too far into logical aridity, and in the process become weak. In the womb of fire shall we be annealed. There shall we be reborn in a stronger, purer guise." Spock shut his eyes. The womb of fire. That region was perilous to the point of insanity. A barely intelligible signal from another ship filled the shuttlecraft. "Bearing 24.9, west, 24.9, storm, sand, engines failing, going down, wait." The transmission stopped with terrifying suddenness. Beside Spock, David gasped. "They've crashed. My mother might have been on that ship." "We do not know that. We do not even know if she was taken hostage." Sered was transmitting to other craft. "Follow us. Do not deviate from our path." "You see, David, there are other vehicles. Even if your mother was captured, she may be safe on one of those." A guard barked at them. "You two, enough talking." The boys fell silent. The storm died away. The shuttlecraft entered the rugged region considered unlivable even by the hardiest of Vulcans. Jagged volcanic peaks thrust up against the sky, and the landscape was covered with twisted black ropes of lava. The shuttle landed with a jolt, and the hostages were forced into a huge cavern. Rough walls, Spock noted, with a good deal of recent fracture. The ground shook again. Stilled. Spock steadied David, who had fallen against him, and then murmured, "One more tremor, and that wall will be breached." David nodded. "Come on, earthquake." The tremor hit. Hidden by a cloud of dust, Spock and David scrambled through the newly opened rift, out into the open. Spock turned to Rabin. "By the time they realize we're missing, assuming that they do realize it, we'll be far from here." Then he noticed David's distress. I can't breathe." Of course, a human would need help to breathe the thinner atmosphere. "Easy, David. Breathe as slowly, as rhythmically as you can. We shall find you some triox compound." They both knew that the only place for such a find would be the wrecked shuttlecraft. Neither wanted to mention that David's mother might be one of its victims. But where had the craft crashed? Somewhere fairly close. They had landed not too long after, and the pilot of the doomed craft had mentioned a bearing. 24.9 west. "David, I believe I know where we may locate the crash." David struggled grimly to his feet. "Lead on." They set out across a barren waste of gray flint, red rock, and ancient black lava. Used to desert terrain though David was, without that triox compound he needed to rest more and more frequently. They must reach the wreck soon, Spock thought, or David might well not survive. But now they found themselves faced with a steep, rocky slope. Spock scouted the area, then returned, shaking his head. "We can only go up. But we have all but found the shuttlecraft. See, there and there, where the rocks are scraped and scorched. The craft must have come in over them and crashed on the far side of the slope. Wait here. No, if the shuttlecraft's just ahead, I want to be there too. With Spock's help, David struggled up the slope, gasping painfully for breath, staggering, falling, yet stubbornly refusing to give up. At last, they crested the slope. Look, Spock, down there, the shuttlecraft. What had once been a sleek, modern craft was now nothing but a broken, twisted mass. No one, Spock thought, could have survived. Surely, David knew it too. But all the humans said was, "Come on." He staggered down the far side of the slope, falling more than walking, and then tried to run. Spock caught his arm, forcing him to a more cautious pace. They plowed forward until they stood at the shuttlecraft's crumpled side. Spock warned himself that he must not think of what lay within. He must concentrate only on finding the Triox compound and some protective gear for David. But it took all his training and self-discipline to stay analytical at the sight of the broken forms within the shuttle. White-faced and shaking, David searched body after body. All at once he raced from the wreck, sobbing. Spock forced himself to continue the hunt. The communications gear was shattered, but there was a good supply of Triox compound and some desert gear. Spock hurried to David's side. The human was sobbing. She wasn't there, Spock. My mother wasn't there. Then you are weeping from relief. Doubtless, anoxia is adding to your reaction. He carefully injected David with the Triox compound. David took a breath, another, relief plain on his face. Much better. Thought I wasn't going to make it. He wiped his eyes, then wormed his way into the protective gear. We have a long way to go, don't we? Yes. We can make it, can't we? There was a heartbeat's pause before Spock answered. I survived my Cas-1 trial, the ordeal that pits a Vulcan boy alone against the desert. Desert training in the Negev wasn't exactly a picnic either, but I survived that. Together, they set out into the desert. Obsidian, Deep Desert, year 2296. Dr. Leonard McCoy was having a rotten day, or night, or whatever it was. One moment, Captain Rabin's 10-ton Farsi security chief was frog-marching him into a cave. Then, 3 men, even stronger than Kavusi, had jumped him. He'd been blindfolded and spirited off in some rough, winding vehicle for far too long to wherever the hell they were now. Another damn cave. At least they'd left him a candle. What he saw by its flickering light wasn't encouraging. The rock faces were slick obsidian, nothing to use as a weapon. Can't say I think much of the hotel staff either. Footsteps alerted him. Tall figures in desert robes faced McCoy. Their posture wasn't just military, it looked Vulcan. Their eyebrows slanted, their ears were pointed. Now why would Vulcans? Eat. The wrapped bar tossed to him bore blocky Klingon glyphs. McCoy couldn't read them, but he knew Klingons ate as much meat as they could, as often as they could, as opposed to Vulcans whose code of nonviolence, made them vegetarians. He got the message with the meal. Deliberate insult. Look, I'm hot, I'm tired, I'm dirty. I probably stink to high heaven. An offense to your fine Vulcan sensibilities. And on top of everything else, you feed me stuff you wouldn't throw a stray salat. The tall figures looked at one another. One of them laughed. McCoy stifled a groan. If it looked like a Vulcan but laughed, it had to be a Romulan. and a Romulan presence on Obsidian was the worst possible news. For him, too. If they felt secure enough to reveal themselves, he could forget about a comfy ride back to the base. One of the guards said, "This weakling is the war criminal McCoy?" The other replied, "I hear they call him Bones because of experiments he performed on prisoners." "Not just a damn minute." "Quiet!" This new figure was apparently their commanding officer, a centurion, young for the rank. "Those charges were never proved. He may be a notorious spy, but he was James Kirk's battle companion, and as wily as the captain. Respect to his shade. Whatever else this McCoy is, he is loyal to his own, and he is no torturer." McCoy bowed in his best Southern Cavalier style. "You have my name, sir. May I know yours?" "Ruinek, Centurion of the Empire, of House Minor Streven." "Well, Ruinek, Centurion of the Empire, how about some information? Like where are you taking me and what's happened to my friends?" "You'll be told. If you will not eat, come now." No one pulled a weapon on him, which McCoy supposed was social promotion, Romulan style. He was prodded through a maze of tunnels to a huge cave that had been equipped with enormous metal doors that presumably sealed it off from the desert. Damned impressive. Simply mining and smelting them must have been the work of generations. The Romulans came to seemingly reluctant military attention. Standing with his back to the Romulans was a living cliché, the proverbial mysterious figure in pure white robes. McCoy had always wondered how those characters kept those robes clean. He suspected now wasn't the best time to ask. Slowly the figure turned and acknowledged the saluting Romulans. He was taller and leaner than they, with a cold face, high cheekbones planing up to elegantly pointed ears. Another Romulan just crawled out from under a rock. McCoy heard faint, choking laughter from one of his guards. "Ruinek?" The white-robed figure spoke. "Vulcans do not crawl out from under rocks." "Wonderful. A renegade Vulcan. Vulcans don't attack their allies either. When I last looked, mister, Vulcan was a part of the Federation, and the Romulans weren't." Contempt glinted in the Vulcan's absolutely flat, cold eyes. McCoy had last seen that fixed intensity on Khan as his madness worsened. This Vulcan had the look of a true, deadly, religious fanatic. "If you are the physician McCoy, then he who leads you is Spock, flawed half-breed and outsider." The birth of anyone as unlikely as a half-human baby, particularly one who was the son of Ambassador Sarek, certainly would have made the equivalent of the front pages all over Vulcan. Not unusual that a crazy bigot would single Spock out as an example of all that was wrong with Vulcan. "You're a fine one to talk, turning your back on your own people and double-dealing with Romulans." The Vulcan glared. "They are our brothers. You others are a lesser breed. Enough! There's a task you must perform for me." He held out McCoy's communicator. "The storm has ended. You will communicate with your Captain Spock. Go fish. There are no fish on Obsidian. Just fools, puppets, and my long-lost cousins. I believe I have your price, Doctor. Let me demonstrate." McCoy was led into another vast, smooth-walled chamber, crowded with ragged figures. McCoy gasped. "These people are all dying." Most bore horrible melanomas. One or two sat quietly, their eyes blank, burned out by the sun. A thin woman coughed rackingly, silicosis or the equivalent from all the dust. All showed signs of malnutrition and mistreatment. And all but the very feeblest and youngest were working with hand tools, smoothing the cave walls. Furious, McCoy faced the Vulcan. Bad enough to make them go out there unprotected, but you're working them to death. The Vulcan lifted an eyebrow. I make them do nothing. They have chosen to serve me, as will you. Serve me, and I will give you permission to help them. I will also give you this. A nomad revealed McCoy's medical satchel. McCoy lunged for it, but his guards dragged him back. Earn it! Then, appallingly, the Vulcan smiled. Vulcan, Deep Desert, year 2247. 2 days into their trip across the forge, the human boy searched in his makeshift pack for a spray hypo and one of the precious vials of Triox. Injecting himself, he breathed deeply, then paused, looking at the empty vial. Spock, I've been thinking this over. I've got Triox to help me, but what about the others? Back there with that religious fanatic. Even if we do make it, there's no way we'll get help before the hostages start to die. Spock nodded. I have considered that. But the closest communicators are with Serid. That's it. Spock, I think we ought to turn back. If we got out, we could sneak back in. And if we picked our moment, we could steal a communicator. Logically, he would have them watched. Our safest plan... No, there is no safe plan. Is this not an example of what humans call a dirty job, but someone has to do it? Spock, my friend, this is about as rotten an example as we'll ever find. They set off across open desert, this time taking the most direct line back. Spock found the way by landmarks obvious to Vulcan eyes, crossing barren plains and the slick, wrinkled black surfaces of ancient lava flows. David made himself a sling out of some flexible fibers, but there was little other than grubs for him to eat. There was little other than the thorny desert plants for Spock. David pointed. Spock, what about these lichen-looking things? Lichens are edible on Earth. Can we eat these? Spock almost grabbed David's hand. No, they are a powerful hallucinogen, even for Vulcans. David faced the young Vulcan. Spock, are you scared too? The unknown is always disturbing. So is the thought of facing something overwhelming. Spock considered what he just said. Overwhelming? For two boys to go up against a madman and adult warriors in full training went all the way to what a human might call preposterous. But a human might, like his friend David's ancient namesake, try to beat the odds and succeed. David had taught him a word, chutzpah. Yes, the chutzpah of it was almost reassuring. David, may I ask you a personal question? Why did you choose Starfleet Academy? Well, at the Academy, you can study anything you want, ask any question you need to ask. You get to go anywhere in the galaxy. Can you imagine anything more exciting than discovering a new intelligent race? And while you're traveling and studying, you sometimes get to help people. Spock bit back a totally human sigh. Starfleet sounded like precisely what he'd been seeking. It seems extremely logical. It is for me. Maybe, Spock, why don't you apply to Starfleet too? Spock thought, my parents have other plans for me. Aloud he said, first, we must simply survive. Obsidian, Deep Desert, year 2296.
The crew of the ill-fated shuttle woke to silence and clear skies. Rabin and Spock moved to the cave entrance, flanked by the others, everyone eager to see where they were. The cave looked out on a narrow strip of ledge, scored and blackened, where the shuttlecraft had made its crash landing and almost deadly slide. Captain Rabin shook his head in wonder. "Ensign Prince, I think I speak for all of us when I tell you that was one hell of a piloting job." The ensign smiled. "Oh, well, it was written that we not crash, but thank you, sir." Spock stepped carefully to the edge of the cliff. It would be a difficult climb down, but it could be done. If his suspicions were correct, it had already been done. He dropped to one knee. There, where it could not possibly be missed, lay a tricorder bearing the insignia of Starfleet Medical Corps, and it was shattered beyond repair, deliberately destroyed, and deliberately placed where they would find it. Spock straightened. A vast, rocky plain stretched out before him, glinting here and there with shards of black glass over a layer of tan soil and pale sand. He noted some hints of green. There was, therefore, at least some water. The far horizon was edged by jagged mountains. Dr. McCoy's captors must have had a small, swift craft. Do you recognize this region? Rabin squinted at the landscape. That's due west. Then that must be the Taragi Shah Range. If we bear northwest, we should be only unbelievably far from the Federation base, with a hell of a lot of uncharted desert in between. Oh, well, at least I don't need triox. Rabin looked down. The shuttle was an alarmingly small mass of shiny metal there at the base of the cliff. Rabin winced and turned away to find himself being watched by the crew. Ensign Kavusi, Captain Spock worked long and hard on that transmitter. Stop gawking and see if you can raise our base or the Intrepid. Ensign Prince, go help him. Spock nodded at Lieutenant Diver and Rabin's crew, who all looked somewhat... He sought for a word and settled on forlorn. I have every confidence in you, and in those at the base. When we return to that base, we will speak again. I'm certain your experiences will be highly instructive. Now, why did that make them smile? Rabin and Spock struggled down the cliff and walked on with a steady, ground-eating, energy-saving stride all morning, taking advantage of the relative coolness. The wind whispered harmlessly, stirring the hot, dry, dusty air. After a long while, Rabin spoke. Remember the last time we did this? Having to be heroes when we both were nothing but scared kids? Don't look at me like that, Spock. You and I both know that under that Mr. Cool Logic face you were wearing, you were every bit as scared as me. And, look, Indians. At first, the reference escaped Spock completely. Then, a memory with Jim Kirk's voice whispered, John Ford Westerns. Movies. And he saw the line of desert nomads on the ridge above them. They were seated on Chuchaki, cameloid mounts lean as greyhounds and pure white. The nomads sat absolutely still, keeping even their Chuchaki from fidgeting, making a dramatic point. Then, the line rode smoothly down the ridge to block the way. The only sounds, the jingling of harness and a grunt from the animals. The nomads were shrouded in deeply hooded, flowing robes, tan as the desert. Suddenly they began to shout, and Rabin frowned, puzzled. Why are they calling us the faithful? The nomads, as one, drew and aimed archaic, but Spock didn't doubt quite deadly, projectile rifles. Spock saw fingers tighten on triggers. Taking a logical chance out of desperation, he raised his hand in greeting. Live long and prosper. This was clearly not what the nomads had been expecting. For the first time, Spock saw them stir uneasily, glancing at each other. He followed up. We are not of the faithful, but we do wish to speak of them. He added softly to Rabin, push back the hood of your cloak. Let them see you. Rabin warily pushed back the hood. As Spock had hoped, the nomads reacted to his clearly non-native features. This was plainly not one of the mysterious faithful. More, they were actually pleased. One of the nomads called out,
The kindly fool has finally gained the wisdom to find us.
Rabin raised an eyebrow at that kindly fool epithet, but Spock cut in. Yes, this is the good man who seeks to save your children and make the desert bloom. The nomad gestured. Come. Spock and Rabin were escorted to a rocky outcropping and into a huge cave, its walls marked with pictographs. Spock reasoned that this cave was a refuge, presumably one in which the nomads sheltered during a solar flare. A nomad approached, the hood of his robe pulled back to reveal dark eyes and a lean, sharp-edged face. This uncovering was, Spock suspected, a sign of respect, as was the earthen cup of precious water the nomad bore. Rabin confirmed this. The water ritual. Never saw it outside of street theater in Kalara. We're being honored. The nomad made a great ceremony out of offering the cup. Spock bowed, accepted the cup, sipped, and passed it on to Rabin. He too sipped, then passed it back to the nomad, who drank in turn. The cup made its rounds 3 times. Then the nomad bowed and left. Rabin whistled under his breath. These are the Benat Haran. They almost always do that shoot first, ask questions later routine. Nice job of diplomacy you did. Spock knew it was illogical to feel even quickly suppressed anger at the implied comparison to his father. Most illogical also to feel pleased as well. Vulcan, Deep Desert, year 2247. The 2 boys climbed all of one day and well into the next, scaling jagged slopes of blackened rock until they looked down on the womb of fire. It was a twisted wilderness of black rock and gray cinders. Steam swirled up from fumaroles and pools of superheated mud. Crusts of yellow sulfur and patches of blazingly green lichen were the only color in all that tormented landscape, and the air shimmered with heat. Spock pointed. That is what we seek. That broken caldera at the right edge of the womb of fire. Sereth's fortress lies within it. I recognize the rock formations. The hostages are in there, then. I just hope they're all still alive. All we need is one communicator. The authorities have surely been conducting overflights. With all this desert to be searched, I don't think we can count on the cavalry coming to the rescue. Spock, here's my plan. We get down there as quickly as we can and seize any opportunity we get. Don't look at me like that. We'll think of something. We've got to. Obsidian, Deep Desert, year 2296. It was simple, McCoy thought. All he had to do was sell out his friends. Little thing like that, and he'd be allowed to treat the Obsidians. No. It was one thing to, bend the Prime Directive a bit. Hell, he and Jim had sprained it pretty severely in the past. But if he betrayed folks now, he could very well be leading them right into a trap. Even Romulans and all that. A war. Overwhelmed by helplessness, McCoy sat with his head in hands. Spock, where are you? Why can't you hear me? Carried your Katra around long enough, that should count for something. A tug on his sleeve made him look up so fast that the woman who'd tried to attract his attention gasped and backed away. McCoy smiled. It's all right. I won't hurt you. She pointed at a small pallet against the wall. Is that your child? Yours? She nodded. One gesture his folks and hers had in common, and then she bowed 3 times. McCoy imitated the gesture, much to her shock. She must not be used to much respect. Nodding again, she led him to the child, so wrapped up that McCoy couldn't tell whether it was a boy or a girl. Whatever, the child was feverish. Water. McCoy pantomimed drinking. The woman scurried off, returned with a water bottle. Pulling the swathings off the child, a boy after all, McCoy used them to sponge the child and took the opportunity to examine him. Not a single blemish on him. At least not yet. Ought to get you both to the outpost med center. But, here's the immediate problem. Badly swollen foot. Stepped on a thorn? Yes, here it is. A sharp piece of obsidian made a primitive scalpel. A few moments later, the thorn had been removed, and the child's foot looked much more normal. As McCoy tied off as clean a bandage as the child's mother could scrounge for him, he grinned reassuringly at her. She seized his hand, kissed it with her cracked lips, then darted over to the rock wall, glancing fearfully at the Romulans. They were so used to seeing fear, they didn't even notice. Their mistake. The woman returned with his communicator. She scurried off, and McCoy, concealing the precious gift, retreated to a distant corner of the cave. McCoy to Intrepid. McCoy to Intrepid. Come in, Uhura. Come in. There was a burst of static, which quickly began fading. McCoy glared at it helplessly, wishing he'd had more than basic training in communicator maintenance. But no. Why would a doctor need a more intensive course? Defiantly, McCoy activated the communicator again. He'd try again and keep trying. And if the communicator died, well, at least he would go down fighting. Vulcan, the womb of fire, year 2247. Young Spock and David were deep in the womb of fire. They edged past a roiling pool that reeked of sulfur and past a vent that belched fumes so vile it nearly choked them. Ahead was the top of Cered's natural fortress, riddled with vents and lava tubes. A madman's fortress. David tensed near one of the lava tubes, listening. That's my mother's voice. These tubes must carry sound. The rock tunnel was wide enough for two. The boys crept down the tube as far as they could, and then lay flat. They could peer into a large cave. Below, a lava pool seethed restlessly. Before it stood a rough-hewn stone altar covered with worn ancient carvings. Suddenly, Cered stepped to the altar, his robes crimson and bronze. About his waist hung a jewel-encrusted belt supporting an energy weapon and a curved steel knife. A little shiver raced up Spock's spine. This was a costume of a ruler of the Te Vikram caves. They were warlike, unstable. If we had not turned to Surak, they would have destroyed Vulcan. They could see Captain Rabin trying to comfort the other hostages, children huddling against a wall. One coughed feebly. Two more struggled for breath. Spock whispered to David, "Look, on the altar. A communicator. And that's Triok's compound." David started blindly down the tube. Spock caught him, hanging on with all his Vulcan strength. "Wait, David. Listen. Listen." Captain Rabin was speaking. "Your captives are ill, Cered. You have not taken proper care of them. None but the strong, the masters, must survive. And have you discarded Surak's morality along with his logic? It is the way of the womb of fire, Captain." Captain Rabin's voice rang out. "You plan to betray your own people, to lay waste to a planet that has known nothing but peace for thousands of years. That peace has weakened Vulcan. It is past time to restore our heritage of battle, the beauty of blades quenched in blood, the blaze of energy consuming a rival, kinship renewed with those from whom this world has too long held itself aloof from victory." Incongruously, David's stomach took this moment to rumble loudly. The human glanced wildly at Spock, biting his lip against laughter that could all too easily burst free and kill them both. Both boys scrambled back up out of the tube. David collapsed in a fit of giggles, frantically trying to stop. "I wish I could eat that lichen. Get something in my stomach. Stop its complaining. The thought of being betrayed by my own stupid innards. Maybe the lichens wouldn't hit me as hard because I'm human. What do you think? Spock stared at him. What do I think, David? I think you may have just saved the hostages' lives. Quick, help me scrape up some lichen. It was a delicate, dangerous job, made worse because they were trying to hurry while making no noise. When they'd gathered handfuls of the lichen, Spock gestured. This vent overlooks the lava pool. They hurried down it. David's mother glanced up and spotted them. Her eyes widened, but she continued without a pause, speaking to Sarad's men. You others, the ones this renegade calls cousins, you look like honorable warriors. Does that honor demand warfare against children? The warriors ignored her. Spock glanced at David and nodded. They hurled the lichen down into the lava pit. A sickly green cloud swirled up, dizzying, dangerous. And in that moment, Spock knew with suddenly drugged certainty that reality was about to be destroyed. Obsidian, Deep Desert, year 2296. In the Nomad's cave, Spock sought a moment of meditation. Before he could properly begin, he was interrupted by soft whispers and giggles. He turned and found himself confronted by a wide-eyed line of Nomad children. Greetings. Spock raised his hand in the split-fingered Vulcan salute. The children's small hands could not hold the proper finger positions, and they laughed harder.
Do it again!
David Rabin came up behind Spock. No doubt about it. You're a hit. Before Spock could reply, there was a signal from his communicator. He thumbed it open and heard McCoy's voice through a flare of static.
Spock, are you there?
Dr. McCoy, yes. Your signal is faint. Are you injured?
Only in my pride, Spock. We've got a lot of injured people here.
Do you know where here is, Doctor?
I'm in some blasted big cavern. The cavern's linked by what looks like a network of shiny black lava tubes.
The Taragi Shar.
Could be, Spock. I haven't exactly had a chance to do any sightseeing. I'm stuck in the middle of some fanatical group that calls itself the Faithful. They're locals, but the big boys, the guys with the guns, are definitely Romulans. And it gets worse. Their leader, well, brace yourself, Spock. The leader is a Vulcan. He isn't young, but straight-backed and haughty as they come. Crazy as they come, too, in flowing white robes, like something out of ancient Vulcan history. Coldest eyes I've ever seen on anyone, Vulcan or human. Calls himself only the Master. He's mentioned you a couple of times. Doesn't like you above half.
Rabin said, Spock, that sounds like our old friend Sarad. I would estimate the odds against that.
I haven't got time for a lecture on statistics. Uh-oh. Company's coming.
Spock heard himself say, take care, in Jim Kirk's tone of voice, and the signal broke off. A group of nomads came near, and Rabin approached them. It would seem now that there are some within your land who have chosen to follow a most unusual path to enlightenment. Suddenly, the nomads were murmuring among themselves with an urgency all out of proportion to what he'd said.
The faithful.
Then the nomads fell silent. They stepped reverentially aside to let a small, slender, hooded figure pass. The nomads stopped before Spock and Rabin, and an aged hand pushed back its hood slightly. Spock bowed in respect and felt the woman's hand, light as a leaf, touch his head in brief blessing. The human bowed and was blessed in turn. I am the elder of the Whitestone clan of the Banak Haran. You are the outlander known to us as the Kindly Fool. So I've learned. My clan name is Rabin, elder, and my use name is David. So, and you, O outlander? I am Spock of Vulcan, son of Sarek and Amanda, and now Captain Spock of Federation Starfleet. I regret that I have no clan name to offer you. Come, you of no clan, and you of Clan Rabin. We must talk together. She led them straight into the center of the encampment, a cleared circle ringed by tents. The elder sat with careful dignity and then gestured for Spock and Rabin to sit as well. A child brought water. "Why are you here?" Rabin answered. "Elder, we have come to help. My people, the Federation, are a union of many peoples." He ignored the incredulous murmurs of the nomads and continued. "We've had our problems, but one thing we've learned over the years, that there's no reason to hate someone just because that someone doesn't look like you or follow your customs. When that someone is in trouble, the only right thing to do is help." The leader nodded. "I know that you have been doing all you can." She turned to Spock. "You two are of this same Federation, yes?" "Indeed, Elder. I shall not speak of what has already been attempted. I suspect you know perfectly well of those attempts and failures that have befallen the Federation mission this far." The nomad leader shrugged. "The affairs of the tamed ones behind their city walls do not concern us. The kindly fool means well, but his efforts have not been enough. My people have been speaking with other friends. They look like you." Spock knew the Romulans would not have all disavowed loyalty to their home world to follow a Vulcan leader. They were here, therefore, on orders. So it followed logically that the master, whether he realized it or not, could only be one thing: a Romulan puppet. He asked the leader, "What promises have your new friends made to you?" A chorus of nomads answered.
Sweet water.
Strong children.
Abundant food.
When the cries had died out, Spock answered, "Fascinating. Have you not already received such things from the Federation, or learned to create them for yourselves? When the Romulans make promises, do you feel they can be truly trusted? Is there honesty behind their bargaining? Or is there perhaps a threat?" The crowd stirred, murmuring and groaning, and Spock held up both hands. "I invite you to investigate the possibilities." He sat back to let the nomads decide, very well aware that his words had sparked the storm. So this was the sense of mastery that his father felt in negotiations. Fascinating. Vulcan, the womb of fire, year 2247. The fumes released by the burning lichen rasped, and Spock imagined he could see fire roiling in the fumes. His eyes were fire. If he opened his mouth to shout, his words would be fire. He could hear Captain Rabin shout, "Everybody down! Cover your noses and mouths!" David Rabin had improvised a filter of cloth doused in some of their precious water. "Come on, Spock!" Sarah's voice was screaming in old, high Vulcan. "To me, my brothers! We will seize their wells and hold them against all the nations!" The faithful cried out,
To the fires!
The sword! The forge!
Sounds of battle grew. Spock blinked, trying to clear his vision. We cannot simply rush down there and grab a communicator. The fumes were eating into his lungs. Their poisons were leaching into his blood, into his brain. They would eat his reason. Spock murmured, "The fumes will eat my soul." The eater of souls. David, can you make an eerie noise when I signal? Just leave that to me. Spock gestured David to follow him into the cavern, into chaos. Some of the warriors fought hand to hand. A knife flashed. Someone staggered and fell, nearly landing in the seething lava. The human hostages huddled against the walls. Young Spock cried, "Now!" David set both hands over his throat as if he planned to choke himself and produced a high-pitched barbaric shriek. Spock drew a deep breath, ignoring his burning lungs, burning eyes, and the madness eating out his brain. Searching for his soul, he bellowed, "The Eater of Souls is here!" The shout rose above the turmoil, silencing everything for an instant. The warriors erupted anew into wild panic. Sered stood before the altar, arms outspread. "Come to me, eater of souls! Come if you dare!" Drawing his ritual knife, Sered charged. But the hostages weren't totally helpless. They fought with whatever came to hand, rocks, even pebbles, and handfuls of cinders. One warrior fired wildly at a man in a torn red Starfleet tunic who disappeared in a blaze of red. The warrior turned with a savage laugh to where an Andorian woman shielded 3 human children with her body. Young Spock cried, "No!" Spock threw a rock at the warrior with all his strength. The warrior dodged, then actually giggled, hurled his weapon away from him, and flung himself down, beating his head against the stone until he lay limp. David raced for the altar and the communicators. Spock ran toward the hostages, shouting, "Hide!" Many were too weak to move quickly. Some could barely move at all. Suddenly, Captain Rabin was there, rushing toward the altar and her son. David had dashed from the altar, clutching a communicator. Captain Rabin had a laser pistol. She shouted, "Get moving, people! Follow Spock!" Sered screamed in rage and charged. Captain Rabin whirled and kicked in one smooth motion, sending Sered's blade flying into the seething lava. Again, Sered screamed, "The holy knife! No!" The madman lunged at the captain, hands outstretched to snap the human's neck. Captain Rabin dropped, rolled, started to rise, but a glancing blow struck faster than human reflexes, grazed her head. She fell back to her knees, losing her grip on the pistol, which Sered snatched up with a sharp laugh. David charged Sered, who straight-armed him almost into the lava. David twisted frantically and somehow managed to land on solid rock. Spock stepped into Sered's path. "Is it only humans that you dare to fight? Lunik Tavik, thou poisoner of wells. Half-breed, your spine will snap as easily as a human's." Spock saw a shard of rock like a basalt lurpa. He snatched it up before the battle engulfed him. Sered was gone in the crush. A mad-eyed warrior charged Spock, crying, "My life for yours, my chief!" Spock's will to live took over. He swung his improvised lurpa with all his might. It cracked into the maddened warrior's head, and hot green blood splattered Spock's weapon, hands, face. He stood, stunned. "I never knew how easy it is to kill." Captain Rabin had regained her laser pistol. Steadying the weapon with both hands, she fired over his head. "Surrender, Sered! You're outmatched!" Sered raced off into the folds of stone. Spock started after him. He had killed once. Why not again? He heard Captain Rabin's voice ring out. "Spock, get back here!" Involuntarily, Spock obeyed. Within only a few moments, the air shimmered, stirred wildly as Federation security beamed in, quickly overwhelming those warriors who maintained enough strength to struggle. From time to time, a party beamed in with supplies or out with injured. Spock did what he could to help, watching his hands deliver medications or assist a healer. Yet throughout, he felt nothing. Intrepid 2, Obsidian Orbit, year 2296. Uhura straightened ever so slightly in the command chair. The amber lights signaling yellow alert had been sweeping the bridge for hours. It had been far too long without word from Spock or the rest of his people, and too long, too, without a clear fix on the damned Romulan warbird she knew was out there. "Lieutenant Riches, Romulan warbirds register on our sensors the instant they drop cloaking. Any sign?" "I've checked the normal spectrographic bands, ma'am." "Then check some abnormal ones." "Aye, aye, ma'am." "Helm, shift course, 205 Mark III, on my order." "Course laid in, Commander." "Proceed." Maybe altering orbit just a trifle would lure the Romulans into thinking Intrepid was retreating. For once, Ensign Chang was too excited to remember he was shy. "Commander, I found it again. Or, I did, just for a moment. The Romulan captain took the direct impact of one of those flares, and his cloaking device glitched. I got a fix on his position. He got careless. Edged over into the neutral zone. Cloaking device is back up, but I'm getting some feedback from it. Entry into the Romulan neutral zone by Federation or Romulan ships constituted an act of war. No Romulan ever gets careless, Mr. Chang. Lieutenant Duchamp? No luck raising the base, Commander. Belay that. Send a message to Starfleet Command. Use cipher level D. Level D's been cracked for 6 months, Commander. Duchamp looked at Uhura as if he thought she were cracked too. She answered coolly. The Romulans know that, but they may not know that we know it. A little trick I learned from Captain Kirk. Make your message sound a little frantic. Light dawned on Duchamp's face. He grinned back at her. Aye, aye, ma'am. Then, after a pause, message ready for you to review, ma'am. Now, encrypt the message into that one. Cipher level F. Tell them, Uhura, Commander and Acting Captain of the USS Intrepid II, orbiting around Obsidian in the Loki system, to Starfleet. We have just witnessed a clear and deliberate violation of the neutral zone by a Romulan warbird. In accordance with treaty provisions, a state of war now exists between the Federation and the Romulan Empire. We will nevertheless endeavor to resolve this situation without hostilities. The message hit her station seconds later. She took a deep breath. Now, go to broadband. I want the name of every Constitution-class starship included in your hail. Make sure you include Excelsior. Romulans know another Enterprise veteran commands it, Captain Sulu. Request the aid of the following ships: Shaka Zulu, Patrick O'Brien, John Paul Jones, and Exodus. Duchamp stared at Uhura. Commander, there are no such ships. Very good, Lieutenant. We know that. But can the Romulans be sure? She took a deep breath and stood. There were some things for which you wanted to be on your feet. Go to red alert. Vulcan, the Womb of Fire, year 2247. The last of the hostages had been removed. Spock settled himself on a rock, trying to meditate, to heal himself. After an unmarked stretch of time, Spock looked up from his fruitless meditations. His inner senses told him it was night. Captain Rabin tilted her head at Spock. My son tells me he's spoken to you about Starfleet. I am to be a scientist, a servant of peace as my father is. But I killed. Spock, I wish you had been spared that. It was too easy. Nechama Rabin took a deep breath. Killing. It never does get easy, Spock. At least I pray it never does. Spock seemed not to hear. I failed. Captain Rabin started to put out a hand to soothe him, then let it fall. Spock turned to face her. Captain, there are weapons on board your ships, are there not? At your academy, will David learn to use them? Only when he must. Spock, there's a quote from my people's writings. They shall beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nations shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war any more. That sounds like Surak. Those words are about as old as his teachings, and as true. Then, there is no conflict between the human way and the Vulcan? Not in terms of the desire for peace.